Alrighty. Welcome to episode 38 of Full Circle. I'm Chad, your host, Cheddar Caveman, on lots and lots of stuff on the internet. Today, we don't really have much in the way of news. We kind of got bombarded with a lot last week with Lock and Load and CID. The Northkin CID continues to go forward. The 12 Factions of Christmas, it's my understanding, will be next on the docket. So when that pops up, we will have we may have some more interesting things to talk about. So news-wise, not a whole lot going on. Northkin looks to be a very good CID. I'm really enjoying sort of seeing where it goes. I feel like they're maintaining a lot of the strength of that while they're maintaining a lot of the strength of what the designers were going for with that CID while I think pretty much pulling everything in line. We may at some point talk about the changes to Mulg. I think with what we're seeing from him, we may see more of him, and he was at times a problem model for Circle to deal with, I would say. So we'll review that if necessary. Magic 1 getting rework, a lot of the same stuff. Eilish, who is relevant to our interests, he's gone through many revisions. It would not shock me if where he ends up when we get him with the no quarter ends up being different even than what we're currently seeing. So right now, he's still 5 points. He's still Magic 6. He still has his boost effect, his place effect. But he's lost his RFP spell. He maintained Bleed and Puppet Master, Puppet Strings, whatever the spell version's called. And his upkeep removal is now unbinding or unminding. I don't remember. I think I've gotten it wrong at least once, so I think it's unbinding. Where within his command, which happens to be 5 inches, he removes all upkeep and animi, and that includes friendly. So he becomes a pretty interesting piece. I think at his exact loadout of rules, I personally think he's gone from being pretty clearly worth 5 points to probably back to his original 4-point threshold. I think would probably, I personally think would apply more, but I haven't played any games with him. I'm just going kind of off of where I see the model in relation to the rest of the model. So we will talk more about him when we get our No Quarter Prime in September. One more bit of news to talk about. I am currently about to close on a house, which means over the next few weeks I will be moving. So just as a warning, that could lead to just some disruptions in the show. So either I may miss a week or we may be on a different day. I'm not really sure yet. Don't know how much will go missed. And so forth. So that's just a heads up to anybody who's watching. I'll try to post ahead of time to let everybody know if the schedule is going to change, etc., etc. So still looking forward to keep continuing to do the show, but we'll have to see how things shake out. I know I've talked about doing more tabletop games, talking tactics, talking about maybe even battle reports. I would say all of that is probably on hiatus until the move happens. So just want to make sure I got that out there. So today I think what we're actually going to do is return to the normal format. What I would like to do is go through a few more of the models we haven't hit up. And I'm going to start with the Gallows Grove. So let's go through its stats. It is a Circle Solo. Has 5 wounds, it costs 2 points, and its field allowance 4. It has advanced deploy. It's a medium base model. It's defense 5, armor 16, command of 5. And it has, that's it for the front of its card, and the back of its card really tells the story of this model. It has the rule Central Locus, which is when a model channels a spell through this model, the spellcaster can target models in this model's back arc, which leads us to the next rule. Channeler, friendly faction Warlock. While this model is in the friendly faction Warlock's control range, the Warlock can channel spells through it. It has circular vision. Models never gain a back strike bonus against this model. It has entropic force, so while within 5 inches of the model, enemy models lose tough and cannot have damage removed from them. It is immobile, so it has no normal movement or combat action. It cannot become knocked down or be moved, and it is automatically hit by melee attacks. It also has prowl. While this model has concealment, it gains stealth. And finally, Strange Growth. Once per turn, at any time during its activation, place this model anywhere completely within 5 inches of its current location. This model cannot be placed except as a result of Strange Growth. So we talked about Strange Growth eons ago when we talked about the Sentry Stone, because it's the same rule. So let's talk a little bit about the Gallows Grove. So honestly, I would say this model went from being in like 2/3 of my lists in Mark II, at least half, probably about half of my lists, half to 2/3 of my lists in Mark II, to extremely niche as Mark II rolled around. The biggest reason for that is the change to, for me, was two big reasons for that. One, the change to Strange Growth meant that it went from having about a 6.5 inch place to strictly a 5 inch place. And while that doesn't seem like much, over the course of 2 turns, I've lost 3 inches of movement, and that's all it gets. It can't be placed by any other means. It can't be pushed, can't be moved. That's the only way it gets around. And that's a pretty big detriment. Like, you kind of need to put it out there for it to get used. Secondly, the change to how Prowl works has had a significant impact. So now the model has to be completely within something that provides concealment, and that means so commonly what I would find myself doing in Mark II would be just based on how terrain normally is set up. You kind of frequently would get a scenario where like one side had a forest and the other side was empty. And if you brought Swamp Gobbers, which we may talk about here in a little bit, actually, we haven't talked about a minion entry in a while. If you have Swamp Gobbers, you could have those go up one side while your Gallows Grove is sort of going up the other. And the like natural forest would provide stealth for that one, and then your cloud you put down on the other side. To a degree, you can still do that a little bit, but it's a lot trickier. You've got to get that tree completely in an AoE. Also, another big enabler of these used to be Druids of Orboros, because they just drop clouds. And since they just drop clouds, you could like tow the side of it into it, and you could sort of always make sure that they had stealth when they need it. That said, probably the third reason they've dropped off is lots of the spells that you're wanting to actually throw out there with it are offensive spells into infantry, and there's just until recently there has been less infantry. So let's bring this into Mark III. What are their uses? Well, Entropic Force is still going to be pretty tricky to utilize in my experience. It used to be very applicable actually with Morvana too, because she could feat and just like drop them wherever on the table she wanted to remove tough. And again, the higher threshold of movement made it easier. However, in Mark III, they did get an additional 2 inches on that, so presumably you're going to cover about what you did. However, that rule is probably what I used the least. But don't forget about it. There's some matchups where that is absolutely going to be key to how the matchup plays. So the next thing is you want to include it with a warlock who wants to sling spells or well, we'll get back to that. Who slings spells? Who doesn't, for the most part, bring their own arc node in some form. So what I mean by that is Wormwood has Cassius, who is infinitely going to be a better arc node than the Gallows Grove. He's way more mobile. You can keep him way safer. He can make attacks. He's just going to always be significantly better, in my opinion, than a Gallows Grove. Laris is also going to be much more relevant to Kaya. She's highly mobile, and Laris is also highly mobile, and I just think a Gallows Grove is going to move too slowly to really make any amount of difference with her whatsoever. So where would I include it then? Well, there's a couple different things to think about. One, where do you need to put spells? So one thing that's changed is we can't use a Megalith or Wold Wardens to Geomancy upkeeps anymore. So you may have a situation or situations where you need to make sure your upkeep or a buff in general can get to the right place on the table. So if you have a caster who really wants to, say, flank significantly, who needs to put an upkeep somewhere, the Gallows Grove can actually function sort of as a control area extension, and you can actually put the Gallows Grove behind models. In Mark II, this was common with Baldur II, and I would suggest that's still a common place for it. I think Chromac 1 at times may consider doing this if you, let's say, I'm just throwing some hypotheticals out there, but let's say I wanted to put a Warpwolf Stalker sort of on both flanks. Well, Chromac probably doesn't want to come forward. He's actually, Chromac 1 is relatively squishy. And you're frequently going to need to, or you're going to want to cycle, you may want to cycle something like Wild Aggression between your two Stalkers, so you upkeep it on the one, and then when Chromac activates, you want to put it on the other one. But Chromac may not be able to get in the right position for that. So again, you could keep your Gallows Grove sort of back off to the side on whatever flank you're thinking about, and use the Gallows Grove to cycle your upkeep. So that's one way. So that's sort of the I would call that the cost of the creature comfort, cost of living improvement, right? It's the sort of a piece you're not going to see. You're going to want to cut that out like every time you're building a list, and you're not really going to see the value of it until you're playing and you're like, well, damn, like if I had Chromac wouldn't have had to step forward if he had this Gallows Grove that was 6 inches behind where that Stalker was going to land, and I could just cycle it and I'm safe, and at most I lose my 2-point model. So that's one place. Another place is things that easily enable its prowl. So I think Morvana 2 sticks out to me as a potential there, and she actually does want to sling some spells. I don't know that I super would play it with Kaya 3, but I would consider it again because of prowl. To a lesser extent, Baldur 1, although he doesn't really have a lot that he needs to sling out there. Morvana 1, it might be cute with, things like that. So just something to consider. If you can keep it safe, it might be higher in value. You can keep it safer easier. And then lastly, you want it with a caster who's slinging a spell that is really good, where you can sort of set up the Gallows Grove to be your trade piece. And the caster that absolutely the most strikes me as wanting to do that is Kruger 2. Kruger 2 can keep it safe because he has Windstorm. You can also position it decently safe. And the thing is, you have this turn where, especially with the way the tables are set up now, where we know there's going to be something central or near central that's blocking line of sight based on the new Steamroller rules. I think you're going to be able to keep it safe for at least a turn. And then what you want to attempt to do is to place it such that you're going to be able to get a very clutch telekinesis or Gallows play off and use that to, say, grab a heavy. Recently in a game against a local who sometimes listens to the show, actually, he put his Thorn too far forward with Haley too. And what I did was I used that Gallows Grove to place forward because I'm like, I don't care if it dies. It's 2 points. But if I can use it to keep Kruger safe while also getting a telekinesis onto Thorn, that's money. And what happened was I used telekinesis on Thorn. Megalith used the Gallows, and then attacks went into it, and that was the end of that. So that's the type of thing you want to look for with Kruger. I think some other casters who want to put out like offensive debuffs, also it may stick out. I know a lot of folks have liked playing with Tanith. Again, if you can keep it safe, what it may allow her to do is have a turn where she's not actually needing to feat for the Arc Node purpose. So she can put out something like an Affliction, possibly a Rift in the right matchup. And again, cycling Scything Touch around the board is going to be another thing that can really be key with a caster like her who wants to get her spells, but still has to sort of positionally remain safe. So that's kind of the purpose of the Gallows Grove. I think that it's probably in a decent place. I do think that it is much harder to use it for the reasons I gave. So I would definitely think about its purpose before you're putting it in the list. Only so many of our casters are really slinging spells, and Entropic Force is. If you're going to use that, do a lot of testing with it. And actually, let me know how that goes. I have not yet found a lot of games where I needed to use it, or where it came up, or I was able to keep my Gallows Grove alive long enough. But I do think it has some purpose in that, and I'd like to see more play of that. That said, also keep in mind a lot of Circle's Warlocks are relatively maneuverable. And relatively often they're survivable, or they have a survival mechanism. A lot of them can bring things like Lightning Strike, so if you can charge up, kill a Trooper model, use your Lightning Strike to get away, like Morvana can use her light, it's not like reposition 5, things like that. So if you can utilize those things well enough, you may not want a Gallows Grove. If you're throwing out those spells, you really do. Kruger 2 so far has been the primary, the model I've been primarily the happiest with. But at times you may have 2 free points, and I think this, test it out. It may be that it actually makes a pretty big difference in how you play your game, and sort of watch to see like, okay, well, I put that Gallows Grove up and was able to use that spell, but did I need to? Be looking for things like that, I would say, with the Gallows Grove. So that's pretty much it on that one. Let's jump on to another model. I've sort of held off on this one, but let's go ahead and do it. Let's talk about Lord of the Feast. I'm pretty sure I haven't talked about him. I have, as I mentioned, been holding off on him, and that's because he's gone through a lot of changes. I feel still like I need to play him more than I have to really give a final definitive place that I feel like it. But let's talk about him. I have played him a little bit. So Lord of the Feast. He is a Circle solo who is speed 5, mat 8, rat 7, defense 12, armor 17, command 3, has advanced deploy, pathfinder, stealth. This is a small base model. He has 8 wounds, costs 6 points, and is a character. He has a ranged attack that is range 10, rate of fire 1, has no AoE or power, and we'll talk more about that on the back side of the card. And then he has Wormblade, which is a 1-inch range, power and strength 13 magic weapon. So let's talk first about the weapons. The ranged attack I talk about has a rule called Shifter. When this attack hits an enemy model immediately after the attack is resolved, place this model base to base with the enemy hit. So if you throw it at a friendly, it doesn't do anything. And Thresher on the melee weapon, which is a special attack. This weapon makes one melee attack with this weapon against each model's line of sight that is in this model's melee range, and the attacks are simultaneous. And then additional rules are he has Death Feast, which is during his activation he can spend corpse tokens to remove D3 damage for each corpse token. He has dual attacks, so he can make his melee and ranged attacks in the same activation. When this model makes his initial melee attacks or a power attack, he can't make power attacks though, it also makes its initial ranged attacks. This model can make ranged attacks even while in melee. And then Heart Eater, I'm not going to go over that again, but it's the same Heart Eater we've talked about Tharn. So if you destroy a living or undead model, you get a corpse with melee. And those corpses can be spent, and this is important with him, to buy melee attacks or boost melee attack and melee damage rolls. Lord of the Feast has gone through a lot of changes from Mark II, and a lot of the Circle community has felt like he went from really hard to use in Mark II, but when you could, he was very valuable, to a model that they have not put on the table. And I am going to actually go over what has changed, because I think it's important if you played in Mark II to understand. So you might have thought he had Thresher before, but he didn't. He had a rule called Blood Reaper, and that rule allowed him to use the Raven and then make a melee attack against everything in his melee range, or vice versa, he can make the melee attack against everything, then use his Raven, and that worked in either direction. He used to have Virtuoso, which is now dual attack, which is slightly better actually, because you make the range attack while he's in melee. Before he'd have to like clear himself out of melee and then Raven. He wouldn't necessarily have to do that now. So the next thing that changed is he used to have 2-inch melee, now it's 1-inch, and he used to be able to boost to hit with his Raven, which at Rat 7, like Rat 7 is one of the best rats you're ever going to find on infantry models, but an unboosted 7 still can be spotty. And then finally, the thing that the next piece that really changed was, in my opinion, was the change to Lightning Strike going to Self. Lord of the Feast was absolutely a model that took a big advantage of Lightning Strike. So big hits. He was 4 points in Mark II. He's 6 points in Mark III. So theoretically, it's a drop. So in keeping with my evaluating model, so it did gain things that the thing it did gain is Death Feast, which is the D3 healing. Sort of the problem I've had with that is it has never. I have played him, just to throw that out there. The issue I've sort of had with that rule is it's never come up, or it's never been the correct thing to do. I feel like a 6-point model, I got to get work out of that guy. And that means if he's going in, I'm probably spending corpse tokens. 12-17 stealth is also, with 8 wounds, is also a very good stat line, but not one that will keep you alive against a dedicated attack. So I like that the rule is there. I think there might be applications for it. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to get a lot of use out of that at this time, based on the guys right there. That said, I do actually think, while I would like to see some changes to him, or just a little bit more of a definition of his role, I would like to see him maybe get a look in a CID at some point. That said, I have played him. I've played, and I would say the only place that I'm really interested in playing him would be in the Devourer's Host. So you've heard me talk a lot about Death Wolves and them being one of the preeminent places to put your corpse tokens, but they do cost 9 points, and Lord of the Feast costs 6. And so if you're only getting about 3, if you're sort of like Tharn Light, where you're only getting like 3 or 4 corpses at most, I really think that Lord of the Feast is going to be somebody who's a good consideration, because one of the things that is definitely relevant is he can still kill a lot of Warcasters. Power 13 is significant. We have buffs that go very well on single models. Just to go over a few of them that I think are relevant. Scything Touch from Tanith is very relevant. Hand of Fate from Una 2, very relevant. Potentially Stone Skin is pretty relevant, and that bumps his armor up as well. I think the one Stretcher makes this less likely, but Morvana 1's Feet is a very interesting place for him. He doesn't really want Carnivore from Morvana 2 because you don't want RFP because you won't get the corpses. Lightning Tendrils, I guess, would be interesting with Kruger 1. I've actually sort of not thought of that, but it seems to me that's interesting, and I will have to, if I do try that, I'm going to have to give a considerable amount of thought to how Thresher works with Electroleaps, because I have forgotten. Chat chimed in on this, but I was working my way towards Storm Rager on Grail is probably the hands down best buff for him. It buffs his melee to mat 10, his POW to 15, and his armor up to 19 while stopping combined attacks. So Storm Rager alone is compelling enough for me to have considered a couple times playing Grail in Devourer's Host, and I just feel wrong every time I do it because I'm like, he's Wolfsworn, and like thematically it doesn't work in my head, and on the table I'm like, he's just like leaving rules off, you know, like his Tactician rule is being completely invalidated, and that sort of bugs me. And I think he really personally likes having Morag with him, but Lord of the Feast with Storm Rager is fantastic. Like I said, best single. I mean, this I suppose is kind of obvious that the best single model warrior buff in the game is the best on him. Like, I guess that's not really that surprising if you stop and think about it. So yeah, Storm Rager. Just trying to make sure I didn't forget any. Him going in on a Curse of Shadows target obviously is good. Trying to go through my list. I don't think I would play him with like a Baldur 2. I mean, the +3 armor is good, but as I said, it's not probably going to be enough. He could be interesting with Wormwood. Again, I think probably going to take some other things there. None of our Beastcasters. I used to play him a lot with Chromac 2, and he likes Carnage. Obviously, the +2 to hit is nice. But a lot of what I used to play him to do was sort of like use my brick and disrupt, and he doesn't really play the same type of brick he used to play. Yeah. So what does he do? So those are some of the significant buffs for him. Why would you bother putting this 6-point model in a list with those buffs? Well, I can tell you the first time that I did this, and this is not my idea, I stole this from the Circle Facebook group for sure, so was I put 3 corpses on him with Una 2. I put him in a triangle of shifting stones to start the game, and I waited, and my opponent had never seen him before, which is going to be more and more true as this edition goes on because of people's viewpoint of him. And he this was a Mercenaries game with I think Damiano. He didn't feat. He moved up. He had a freebooter, I want to say, that was close enough to Damiano, and Damiano cast all his spells, and Madeline Corbeau didn't move into position that turn. She did move into position, but she didn't use her ability, and so she just ran so that she was ready for the next turn. And what I did was I put he started with the 3 corpse tokens, and I think that's key because he's going to have a harder time than he used to safely getting corpses. And as with any model with Heart Eater, if you can actually get use out of that rule, you're going to have a really good time. So what I did was put Hand of Fate on him, threw my bird at the freebooter, which was easy to hit. I hit, placed behind Damiano, I think. Maybe I didn't get behind him. I'm not sure it mattered. And I took 4 attacks against him, and he was dead. And had that plan not worked, I was out 1 cycle of Hand of Fate and 6 points. Almost nothing. So that's sort of the strength of Lord of the Feast, in my opinion. I think if you're going to play him, you need to use him to pressure your opponent's caster in ways like that. He has more than his bird has an 18-inch threat range if you keep him in shifting stones. He does have stealth. I think he may have some strength as a counterpunching piece. This is sort of where I've struggled, and maybe if I play him more, I'll revisit. But where I struggled with was like, okay, my opponent is not going to be able, like, I'm not going to be able to kill him with Lord of the Feast right now because he's too high of armor, can't too many focus, has some other attack that I'm not aware of. Madeline Corbeau will totally like, he's done. There is no assassinating their caster if they have Madeline Corbeau in this way, because he's a warrior model, and she goes nope, and that's it. So where I've struggled is what to do with him in those games. Now POW 13 is nothing to, boostable POW 13s are not bad. We talk about the Death Wolves, and I'm using a lot of Tala's boosted 12s and Skull's boost 14 and the combo to 15 with Skull. Sorry, Caleb. And so what am I using Lord of the Feast for? Well, he's going to be able to reliably get, if you think about it, even walking, he could boost a POW 13 by boost. He can just make 4 POW 13 attacks. Those same measures that I talked about will help him do that. There may be some strength there. But this is sort of where I struggle with him. It's the 6 points that I put in the list, and I need it to pressure their caster, but I also need it to do something else in those games. And that might be where I need to do some work on that if I play more of him. But that's sort of where I feel like he's a little weaker right now. And part of that reason, that's where the Lightning Strike change really affected him. Because what I would like to do with him, so again, Chromac 2 is where I most commonly played him in Mark 2. And one of the things I used to like to do was like charge into some infantry, Thresher, and then just sprint back, basically. Depending on the game and the situation and stuff. Sometimes I would bird out Thresher and then like sprint farther back and be like, okay, well, you guys can send stuff to deal with Lord of the Feast. I still have this brick here, you see. But without Lightning Strike, I'm not really able to do that. The 3-inch move that Grail provides is interesting for that. Another reason, Grail's feet is also fantastic with him. It's another reason I'm a little sad that he's just not included there. But I don't know that he's worth taking over the Wild Hunt. But so anyways, that's where Lord of the Feast is. I would love to. There's a lot of models we've talked about on the show that I'm hoping at some point I'm able to like go back, revisit, and talk about again. Maybe post CID, maybe a new Warlock comes out, maybe a Theme Force tweak happens, maybe another model comes out that affects him. Right, like if he can consistently get corpses turn over turn, these things will sort of change. So. That's it. Also, one thing to keep in mind, he is relatively tanky. An arm buff on him is not something to shrug off either. Chromac 1, Orvana 1, either Balder. Although, like I said, a Balder 2 list playing him would be interesting indeed. So that's some stuff to consider with Lord of the Feast. And let's go ahead and hit up one more thing. But I think we're gonna keep it a little lighter today. I know there's a couple more Warlocks we haven't talked about, but I want to talk today about one of the unsung heroes and minions for Circle. This unit should just be a Circle unit, although other factions use it. But I would say we use it the best. out of them, and that is the Swamp Gobber Bellows crew. So let's talk about these little guys. They are speed 6, mat and rat 3, defense 15, armor 11. They are command 5, small base models. They have hand weapons that are half-inch melee range and are POW 5. Just double checking. Yeah, they're the same. The grunt and leader are listed separately for a rule, but and then there's 2 models in the unit. They cost 2 points and their field allowance 1. They're minion models and they work for all non-Grimkin Hordes armies, so Circle Legion, Scorn, and Trollbloods. And the leader has a star action which says place a 3-inch cloud effect in play with its center point 1 inch from the leader. If the grunt is base to base with the leader, place a 5-inch AoE instead, and the AoE will remain in play for 1 round. That's it. That's what they do. And they are amazing. I've actually been really missing them in a lot of the theme forces that I've been trying to build. And the first thing I thought about when that theme force change was announced, that we're looking into being able to bring a minion solo or unit into a theme possibly, the first thing I thought about was it's awesome that those guys are a unit, because a lot of times I'm not going to really want to bring a minion unit into my list, and I can bring them, and I may still want to bring a solo, and I can do that too. Fantastic. And you're like, why is Chad so excited about these little gobbers? It sounds like they don't really do anything. They leave a 5-inch cloud wherever you want it. I don't know if you've, hopefully you've been paying attention as I've been talking about all these things on the show, but we have a lot of models that have Prowl, a lot. I'm just going to list a few off the top of my head, and I'm probably going to miss some, but Tanith, Wormwood, Cassius, Loki with Tanith, Warpwolf Stalkers when they warp it, Gallows Groves, Sentry Stones, Druids of Orboros, Wolflord Morag, Death Wolves. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. Shoot. There's more. I'm pretty sure there's at least one more. Anyways, that's enough models to make my point, I think, anyways, though. And that's before we figure it also can block line of sight. It's a cloud, right? It's a mini cloud wall you can bring in any list. Also, it's important because a lot of the other clouds have to be centered. This one, you're still within an inch of it, which means even the 3-inch cloud, you can fit 1 large base in. And the 5-inch, you can fit 2. You can fit a bunch of things. Blackclad Wayfarers have Prowl. Very important. And while stealth isn't as important as it used to be, it is in a lot of matchups. And all of a sudden, like Tanith to me, one of the big things that I've been like, man, I really want to build a Tanith list, but I like Prowl on her and Loki is so good, and I want to enable it. And I'm like, maybe it's just better to play her out of theme. If I can play them in theme, I'm really going to be considering more Tanith lists again, because that is so good. I mean, your Warcaster your Warlock rather having Prowl is so good. They can, with the terrain rules, you can take a situation and you can put the cloud will stay in play if they die, so you can put them forward in a place where you have a forest and they extend that by another 5 inches. Or with somebody like Balder or Wormwood, you can extend it, they have a spell and they can go further with it than that. Things of that nature. And being able to and again, really just giving your Warcaster concealment is huge, right? We have a lot of Warcasters in the defense 14 to defense 16 range, and if you give that +2 against their shooting, that can be a pretty big deal. You might be able to give your Sentry Stone stealth on a turn when it needed to use all of its fury for boosts. You can give some of your Druids it if you needed to use their attack but still want to keep them somewhat safer. Things like that. I mean, this is a model where it sounds so dumb, right? You're like, oh, it's this 2-point model, it's a cloud, I don't really need it in every list. You don't. But if you have 2 points free, and a Gallows Grove that I was just talking about doesn't make sense, and you're not in a theme at the moment, check these guys out. They're gonna definitely be worth consideration. Think about the Kruger 1 list I've talked about a lot. It's already giving +3 defense to everything. Now I can guarantee another 2 on top of that, kind of anywhere I want. I mean, that's the difference between Kruger and Getter possibly living, because their defense finally, shot up that next tier of doable. So, I mean, there's not a lot to talk about with them, right? I've probably exhausted about as far as I can go. But if you don't own them in Circle, first of all, they're like $8 because they're older models and they're tiny. You should buy them. They do play. If you do play any other Hordes factions, they're going to play for those. I think it would be cool if they played for Grimkin, because I could see that fitting. I'm not saying they need to. I'm not saying that's something Privateer absolutely needs to change. But if they did, I think that'd be cool. But in Circle, I've just used them so many times. I mean, that was the key in Mark II a lot of times, keeping somebody like a Chromac 1 safe, because he's a little squishy, and if you can make sure you get your cloud where you need it, you're good. Figure out what size cloud you need too. If you're using the cloud to block line of sight, you may only need the 3. Keep your other Gobber back, because what's going to happen is when they promote, you're going to be able to do. You're not going to get both of them dead, which, like, blast damage is usually how they get got, or E-leaps, things like that, the sort of auto-hitting stuff, because their defense 15 is pretty hard to hit, and they're frequently in a cloud, again, so the defense 17, but, they only have 1 hit point, pretty easily killed if they take damage, so. Anyways, Swamp Gobbers, Bellows crew. Consider them. Get them. Apologies to Jacob, I believe it was, on Facebook. I don't think I'm going to get to talking about the Fianna Oracles list matchups today. 1, we've already gone about 40 minutes. 2, I honestly have never played I've never played into it, so I want to think about it a little bit more. If I get a chance to play into it, that'll absolutely be when we talk about it. If I don't get to play into it for a long while, I will probably put out some theory on what I think are some tips into it. But for the time being, that's kind of where I'm feeling like it's at the moment. So I'll think over it. We'll maybe talk if I get a chance to play it. We'll talk. And I would say the immediate, just to throw one nugget out there for it, the immediate thought I have with it is you want Wild Arguses in your whatever list is going up against it. Probably singular one, but I think that's one of those pieces that will be able to turn the tide for you. So you give it some thought, I'll give it some thought, we'll come back, we'll have a discussion about that. So with that, though, I'd like to go ahead and start wrapping up. As always, love to thank my sponsors, Muse, who lets me use their website to post content, which is great. I need to actually do that. I've been really busy with house stuff and just frankly forgetting, but I do need to do that, as well as going back through my videos and updating the comments. I am still going to attempt to put together a list. I may use my blog site for this, of like what I talked about in what episode, with like a like table of contents type layout. So I'm gonna try to do that as well. And then of course, Griffin's Roost Painting. Beautiful models there. I'm really looking forward to my stuff getting worked on right now has been a little bit delayed because of the move and commissions coming in. But hopefully I have some cool stuff to show you guys in the near future. But Griffin's Roost Painting, fabulous. My wife paints beautiful models. I am biased, but I'm also right in this case. So check them out, griffinsroostpainting.com, or Griffin's Roost Painting on Facebook. You can search there, you can send her a message. Also, just of note, she was featured in last week's No Quarter, which is very cool. And also has been featured a few times on Privateer Press's website as a guest blog, and hopefully when the move, when things shake out with the move and everything, I believe there'll be another one of those coming sometime soon. That's up to Privateer Press a bit, and I think she's still working on the article. So I'm excited when I see that one. That's going to be a great article. So anyways, thanks everybody, and if possible, we will catch you next week.